The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply. USAA.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay. With experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
From the Fifth Quarter Studio in Madison, Wisconsin, you're listening to the Coaching Youth Hoops Podcast.
They're playing basketball.
Here's our hosts, Steve Collins, and Bill Flitter.
Hey everybody, welcome to Coaching Youth Hoops. Coach Bill has taken over. As you can see by my goatee here, I'm on a little bit of a break. But before we jump into the podcast, I want to make sure you go over and check out coachingyouthhoops.com, the one-stop shop for anything you need as a youth basketball coach. Practice plans, handouts, videos, you name it. It's all there. It's a one-stop shop. It's basketball coaching in a box. And prices are going to be going up this fall. So if you're thinking of coaching your son's or daughter's team, coachingyouthhoops.com is the answer. Go over and check it out. And if you're part of a youth organization, let us know. We can take care of your whole youth organization too. But go over and check it out, coachingyouthhoops.com, and let's head off to the podcast.
Hello, coaches, and welcome to the Coaching Youth Hoops Podcast. Hope you guys are having an amazing day. We have a special guest today, Mary Volmer. She's a former player and quasi-coach, I guess we could say. You haven't fully committed yet 100%, but she has a son who plays and she helps out on his team. Mary is also a professor at St. Mary's College, where she teaches English and a few other subjects. Author. What else? Yeah. Wife, mother?
Yeah. Well, I took a job just recently in February as the mission fellow for athletics, which is kind of like a chaplaincy position. So I work with the NCAA athletes and some of the club teams too on balance and spiritual wholeness. And as a former D1 athlete, I had a lot of struggles with that and have subsequently learned a great deal about helping myself. Also helping artists, because I'm a novelist. So I spent the last probably 10 years of trying to help artists and writers find a balance that contributes to their art, but also acknowledges the wholeness of their being. And so I'm trying to bring that now to NCAA college athletes. And it's been a real joy. And of course, the crossover, the youth sports is completely transparent. I've coached the CYO boys at Santa Monica's, my son and a bunch of others, and also help out wherever I can without being an annoyance as well. And so I've learned bringing a lot of the things that I've learned about contemplative prayer, about meditation, some of Phil Jackson's philosophies of team building and athlete building. If you hear something in the distance, that's my nephew who's singing a very strange song loudly. So it's exciting. It's exciting to be here. It's exciting to come back into basketball after spending most of my youth in compelled by nothing else. and coming back now as a teacher and an author and a coach to have a broader perspective on what maybe I wish I had as a young athlete, and what maybe we can offer as coaches now to our young athletes.
Well, yeah, and let's dive into that right away, because I think you do bring a unique perspective. You obviously played high school, played college. Now you're helping D1 athletes with their time while they get to play. And I think you hit on a very important subject, is instilling knowledge that you wish you had during your playing days. And I guess, what are you sharing with your athletes? If you had 3 takeaways, like for aspiring college athletes, what would you say to them? Or what are you saying to them, really?
Well, the aspiration itself is worth the pursuit. And I think the misconception is that you have to attain some goal. And the goal is important, but the goal is a means of achieving some kind of wholeness that you otherwise wouldn't have done without it. So, and what I mean by wholeness is the ability to devote oneself, the ability to understand what sacrifice is, sacrifice for a team, but also sacrifice for some outcome that is not sure. Embracing that uncertainty on a daily basis, and doing the work. And that kind of thing is going to translate to anything a young person is going to pursue in the future. Anything. And
I'm going to coach the coaches out here listening, because I think that's a really important part, is the sacrifice. Right? How can a coach help their athletes with that message? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think there's sacrifice for a team, and there's sacrifice for your own development as a human being and as an athlete. And I think they have to go together. Athletes, especially young athletes, have to understand that there is no complete sacrifice of self for team. That and in the process of becoming part of a team, an integral part of the team, you gain far more than you lose. And a coach's job is to kind of reveal what that gain is and embrace it. So if you are Rudy, and you're gonna, and that was my role in college, right? I was very good. I was an All-American in high school, but when I got to college, I wasn't big or tall enough, didn't quite have the mental strength to push through some of those limitations, but I was in practice, and I was going to make every starter better. And I recognized that was my role, and my coaches recognized the value of that role. So did my teammates. So even though I wasn't gaining the notoriety, I was helping us move forward. And that was very satisfying in the end. So having even that, my sacrifice of my time and my energy and my effort and my pain for something that wasn't necessarily reflecting directly on me was still very satisfying.
Yeah, that is one of the things that I talk about in my team is I always ask them, who's the most important person in the room, right? And we go through this exercise, and then someone will say the person next to them, and they'll recognize them for something that they've done, right? Basketball related or whatever, it doesn't have to be, right? A lot of times it's something they've done in practice. You know what? I noticed her effort today, or noticed her energy, or noticed, during the drills, she was really struggling, but then figured it out, right? Mm-hmm. The whole idea behind that, of course, is to put the focus on someone else and work harder for someone else than yourself. Yeah. Because I think of those limitations we naturally put on ourselves, right? But for some reason, I'm going to work so much harder for you, Mary, on the court. If I can change that mindset that I am for myself, all of a sudden those limitations go away.
Yeah.
And that's the whole, that's what we're trying to communicate. So
yeah. And there's 2 things I think in there. One, the sacrifice doesn't have to be large. One of the things we would do is that I decided I would go rebound everybody's ball. I would make sure that I went and got the ball and brought it back. It was a very, very small change. And it was a point in the year where we were about to lose it. Emotionally, chemistry-wise, we were just on the brink. And just that small gesture, unspoken, and probably unconscious on my part, Only upon reflection do I understand what it meant. After a while, everybody was doing that. Everybody was just going and getting someone else's ball and bringing it back. Yeah. And that sense of camaraderie and very small sacrifice led to a larger feeling of togetherness that we wouldn't have achieved necessarily without those small gestures. And what you said about taking time, just taking time to notice. There's 3 no's, like to notice, to name it, and then to know it. To notice what someone else is doing, to name it out loud, and then to know it about yourself and your team. Those are 3 things you can do every day in practice. And it does take time away from the physical aspect, but that mental aspect is so important and so emphasized, I think.
And I like the way, so it's notice, name it, and know it. Did I get that right?
Yeah. And it's a feedback loop, right?
Yeah. It's quick, and it's something that, again, a coach can instill in their practice or after a game or whatever it is, right? I'm curious, though, going back on the conversation, and I think this is really important. You achieved high levels in high school. Now you're at D1, and now you're quote unquote just rebounding, we'll call it, right? You obviously came in with an ego thinking, hey, I just got to I'm playing D1 basketball, and realize, oh, I'm not the best person on this team. Mm-hmm. That's a big shot to your ego. So and let's bring that down now, right, to the other levels in basketball. Grade school, right? I'm the best player on my grade school team. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm not the best one on my high school team anymore, right?
Yeah.
Right. How one, personally, do you make that adjustment and realization? How long did it take you? And then 2 is, how does a coach help a student through that, maybe recognize that, and give them the tools to, like, because there's this balance, though, Mary, of, kind of, oh, I'm not the best one, but am I just being hard on myself, or am I really not the best one?
Yeah.
And is it just, I just don't know, and I need to get to there. So there's a lot in that, but I just want to, I think it's a good subject to talk about, and how you fight through all of that.
I think I understood it after I was done playing, but I understand it now, and I understand it watching my son play and coaching. Mm-hmm. And one is that there's a wholeness of being that's emerging in every young person, and the athletics might be part of it. But in the same journey where I was struggling on the court, I was starting to write. There was an outlet for my frustration, and it emerged that was a talent. And so allowing yourself, when you hit walls, to grow in other directions, that doesn't mean that that's the end of growth. It just might be a means of growing in another direction. Yeah. And the other thing is the notion of being a best on the team. If we can somehow undercut that by saying you're the best rebounder, you've got the best handles. I mean, 5 people on a team that need to work together, and how do you acknowledge and celebrate the talents of someone else without undermining your own ability, undermining your own, whatever it is you bring to the team. And if we can figure out a way of instilling that in the very lowest levels of youth sport, so that as they grow up, they're not thinking I'm the best or I'm nobody, which is kind of, I don't know that it's an American notion. I spent a lot of time in England and Wales, where football, of course, soccer is more dominant than anything. No one is going to dominate. You got to have all different kinds of talents and abilities to contribute. But how can a coach help a student athlete? Again, notice them. Notice what hey, I like that nail polish. That's cool. What did you get that? Or I like other aspects of the person walking in the gym, the whole person walking in the gym. How'd the test go? Is your sister all right? Noticing these things, naming them, and then letting that person know that they're known as a valuable part of the team beyond what they can do with that orange ball. And at the lower levels of youth sport, wins and losses, maybe they matter, but they probably shouldn't. It really is the development of that whole person. And then helping them when they get to those levels where they meet the boundaries. Now, some boundaries are solid. If you're 5'1" and not a tremendous athlete, there's only so far you can go in the sport. There's a lot of other places you can go. Or if that kid is 5'8" and she's hit a plateau, and it's hard. Suddenly it's hard. It's never been hard before. How do you help that person say, yeah, it's hard now. What are you going to do? You have two options. You can say, I'm not going to do this because it's hard, or you can embrace the difficulty and just see how far you can go. And as a coach, you have to kind of recognize the difference between an athlete who is discovering hard for the first time. I'm not the best on my varsity team. That's an opportunity for growth. I'm probably not going to play in my varsity team. That's also an opportunity for growth, but just in another direction, and to value that direction as much as you value the varsity team.
Well, and what about the opposite of that though too, which is the player maybe is, barely made the team, but then all of a sudden thinks he or she is the best on the team.
I see that more in boys than I see it in girls.
You see it more in boys, you said?
I see that mentality more in boys than I see it in girls. We just did a study on Division I and Division III men's basketball team, men's sports generally, and the perception of where they were going after this. And Division III and Division I men all thought they were going pro.
Oh, wow.
and it was like, because that's kind of what they're born into. Women have not had that ceiling for very long. They haven't had something to aspire to, so their eyes have always been broader. Now, I think you let the game teach that kid. There's not a lot you need to say. When they're on the court, the game will teach that student, that athlete, more than your words can. Now, when it doesn't go well, then you have to figure out how to speak to that student, that to know that the failure, which is what it is, and we can't say that doesn't exist. To say we fail, sometimes we fail. That doesn't mean you're a lesser person. It just means in this particular moment, this is not a success. And to be able to see yourself honestly and with compassion is probably one of the greatest gifts sports can give you. And not a lot of people learn to do that. They're often afraid of failure, and that fear of failure lasts lifetime because they've never had to confront it. And so as difficult as that is, whenever that happens, and some people find it in junior high and some people come against it like me in college, it hurts, it's hard. And the game taught me how to get through it. And the coach wasn't much help.
Well, did you get bitter towards the coach when this was? Did you blame? Because that's what I see.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, right? It's the coaches. Oh, he doesn't play me because he doesn't like me. He doesn't play me for whatever reason, right? It's his fault. It's not because I can't play. It's he doesn't appreciate, doesn't love me, doesn't whatever, right?
Yeah. And that can, then when a kid gets in the game and she perceives she's not being supported, that can make it harder to actually perform to her ability, whatever that is. And I think you just have to have honest conversations. I had a coach sophomore year in college who said, look, you're probably not going to start ever. And I will support you if you want to transfer. I hope you don't, because I think you have this and this and this to offer the team. And I think that's just as important as scoring a lot of points. But you're probably not going to start. What are you going to do with that information?
Yeah, right.
And that honesty, as much as it hurt at the moment, in retrospect, I'm grateful. Did she limit me? I don't think so. You should have seen the athletes I was playing with. They were pretty spectacular. But at least now I could focus on what I could do, what I could contribute, and found great value in that.
So you turned that situation into a positive. So you don't look back and saying, oh, that was a failure in my life. And I think you said it before, it taught you something new, which is your ability to write.
Yeah, it's still teaching me. Yeah. And I can't say that I don't have moments when I think back and think, if I had just had X, Y, Z, if I could have just, and a lot of times I come back to my own mental toughness, which wasn't nearly as tough as I physically was at the time. And really, I think if we can focus more on those, okay, I can coach a 2-3 zone, 1-3-1 zone. Fine. I can do all that. How do you coach mental toughness?
Yeah.
How do you coach spiritual strength and wholeness, even within these difficult situations? That's an opportunity in youth sport that we're not taking
a little
advantage
bit, because we've heard a lot about mental toughness right now. We're at Coaching Youth Hoops. We're launching some mental toughness exercises and incorporating that within practice plans. So a youth coach who's got 1 to 2 practices a week can use these exercises, right? Because most of us are not trained as sports psychologists, right? And so we need the tools to help us, just like most of the volunteer coaches are not coaches, right? It's not what they do, right? So, we give them the tools. So, we're coaching the game on the court and the game in the head. But
llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre a la para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Touch upon that on the mental toughness side, but then also the spiritual side and what you mean by that, and explore that a little bit.
Well, they're linked. The notion that physical toughness, mental toughness, spiritual wholeness they're separate. They're not. They're all feeding one another. You look at the best athletes in the world. You look at the Stephen Currys. You look at the way they approach the game and their physicality, and you think that the two cannot be separated. Now, how did they learn that? Phil Jackson has a book, Sacred Hoops, where he traces the way that he went from a purely physical player to one that approaches the game on a spiritual and mental level. He uses Buddhism as his kind of framework. The difficulty is, of course, we can talk about sports, religion and politics, like the two things you think sports are free of. How do you do that in a non-denominational, open ways? Yeah. I think a lot of the Catholic colleges and high schools and lower, they have a built-in platform for kind of addressing those kinds of concerns within the framework of the Catholic tradition, which the students, by virtue of going there, are buying into. But there are ways of non-denominational, just meditative practice. Learning how to sit in silence. Gratitude practice is a really easy, I'd say. You can do it every day. What are you grateful for today? And just that question makes them acknowledge, and then it turns the energy of the room into a positive energy. Whatever that negative energy comes in. I mean, teenagers, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. What are you grateful for today?
Yeah.
And then you're just turning that notch to the positive level, and then you can go towards practice from there. You acknowledge when someone just loses it. Just loses it. Let them lose it, because you're never going to kind of help somebody in the midst of that breakdown. Afterwards, though, like my son, I'll use my son as an example. Very competitive kid, loses his mind sometimes. Just the things aren't fair. I got fouled, just loses it. So afterwards, I said, we have to talk about how do you recognize the triggers that are sending you down that rabbit hole before you go, because once you're in there, it's hard to get out, and then counter them. And one of the ways we do this, and one of the ways I also do this with my college athletes, is we talk about breath. So even if you're at the free throw line, if you're in the penalty box, whatever it is you're doing, you can't sit down and do a 10-minute meditation with your hands up. That, you're not going to be able to do that. But there's
I think Coach Bennett would have an issue with that if his.
But in every step, you can take a breath out, and a breath in, and a breath out, and a breath in, and a breath out. And you have time for at least 3 breaths in almost any kind of pause during a game. Free throw line, huddle, wherever you are. You can also use certain imagery, and I use this with my boys all the time, is that where's your head right now? Where is it? and very often their head is like way above their body on a string. They're just, their energy is all up here, and they're all unbalanced, and it's all angst, and it's all anger. So what we do is I say, well, imagine your head is on a balloon. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull your head back onto your body. And even have them kind of rub their own necks, And they think I'm silly and stupid, but they do it, and it makes them feel better. And I'm willing to be silly and stupid just to kind of help them bring their energy back into their body. Because the misconception is there's negative energy and there's positive energy. There's energy. It's energy. And if you can find a way to use that negative energy and bring it down into the body where it's useful, where it's going to drive in a positive direction, that's when you're going to gain some success. Again, it's going back to noticing when a player's energy is all up here. Later, when it's the right moment, naming it. Are you feeling okay? Allowing them to tell you. And then when it's known, those triggers, those things that make them pop. With my son, it's perceived injustice on the court. Right. Then you can start. It's a process. You don't learn to shoot a jump shot in a day, and you don't learn mental toughness or spiritual grounding in a day. Yeah. It's a process over time that you have to constantly address. As a mom and a coach, I can do that on the court, and I can do that at home. It's harder as a coach when you only have them sometimes just an hour a day. But if that 5 minutes of that hour were spent gratitude check-in and with some sort of imagery that they can use to kind of, in the midst of a game, to balance them, there are ways. There are more ways too. If we had a whole 2 hours, we could just go through a whole whole bunch of those.
Maybe that's we'll say that for another show.
Yeah,
it's really important. But do you know Graham Beckhart? Is that name for mental coach for the Sacramento Kings? He's coming on the show, and he has this whole palms down thought process of like you were saying, your son loses it on a refs, like, yeah, it wasn't a foul, right? His hands are up in the air. Well, he's teaching his.
Oh, I like that.
Palms.
Yeah, I like that.
Right?
I like that.
Yeah. Anyway,
a lot of it is physical. A lot of our athletes do emotionally respond in a physical way. And so the remedy for that, or the correction for that, really is physical. The shoulders get very high. To take the breath and get it down. And that's really what that imagery of the balloon, pulling the balloon back on the head. You have to pull your shoulders down in order to do that. And then the story that you tell, the imagery that you use, is going to affect the body. And coaches, there's not a lot of coaches, I think, who are good verbal communicators. And if that's true for you, you have to kind of gather these tools in your toolbox as a coach so that you can go back to them and use them again when words fail you. Because words are going to fail you.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the moment. Yep. Maybe at night in bed, you're going to realize,
Yep.
That's what I should have said.
Had that, Mary, you'll love this story. Oh, it just felt it was eating me alive. Okay, so I coached. This was a 7th grade girl, and I'm doing substitutions, and I had planned substitutions, and I'm sticking with my plan. Okay, so because they like I was telling you before we got on the show, it was so hot in the gym, right? So I was substituting really quickly. I didn't have a lot of subs, so in and out, in and out. And this one particular girl who was next up on the substitution list made a mistake. Okay. But because she was next, I just took her out of the game.
Sure.
Right. So you know where this is going. I'm thinking to myself, after, of course, was like, oh my goodness, she probably thought I took her out of the game because of the mistake she made. Because I don't get mad at the mistakes. I just help them. Hey, next time, here's what you missed, and this is what you should look for. And then she sat down. Okay, so so this was on a Saturday. We had practice the following Wednesday, and I said, we meet for 5 minutes before we start practice. Just have a quick chat about what's going to happen in practice, etc. And I said to her, I have a confession to make. This has been eating me up. I explained to her what happened, and she goes, oh, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't even remember that. And I'm like, thank goodness, right? Like, okay, she moved on. Probably didn't even think about it. Like, okay, next play, right? But I do think about those things because the last thing I want to do is not to have a confident player on the court.
Yeah.
And to pull someone out because they made a mistake. Now, if they're repeating that mistake, that's a different story, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, that was just
but I think your impulse was very good. And even if she didn't remember that, everyone else heard you say that. And so if it happens again by happenstance, they're going to have remembered that, sometimes that's the way, that memory of what you've said in kindness and compassion to that player is going to reverberate down the year to the other teammates. So I think anytime you err on the side of compassion, you're erring on the right, on the right side.
I think that's a great message, right? That coaches need to hear is that err on the side of compassion. And I think, we're losing that or lost it, or maybe it wasn't ever there. I don't know, because I think back now and I say this out loud about some of the coaches. Were they tough? Yes. Did I think they cared? Yes. Some of them. But, one of the questions I asked you when we were setting this interview up was and this goes into this perspective, then and now, right? Your playing days, your high school playing days, and now seeing your son play he's 10?
10, yeah.
Yeah. So seeing him now, you obviously are very thoughtful in looking back on your history and the things that you would change and maybe do the same, instilling this wisdom on at least, of course, life and sports, but sports, since we're talking about that specifically. What are your thoughts on the then and now? And is the game changing? Is basketball as an ecosystem changing for the good, the better, or for the worse or the better, or is there not a black and a white situation? Anyway, just a broad question.
Yeah.
Hey, it's me again, real quick. Just interrupting 30 seconds for the podcast, but go over and check out coachingyouthhoops.com, the one-stop shop for a youth basketball coach. Everything you need. It's what Coach Bill and I would have wanted as youth coaches when we were coaching our kids. Go over and check it out. I'm going to tell you, give you a little secret. Prices are going to be going up this fall. So go over and check it out. Let's head off to the podcast.
Yeah, it's complicated. In part because when I started going up, there were no girls' teams. I played on a boys' team until I was in the 5th grade. And then when I was in the 5th grade, there was no AAU teams. There was the, 6-week youth league that I played in, and then a few camps in the summer. And so the opportunities now to play are so much broader. It's also a lot more expensive. I mean, I don't know that I could have I'm pretty sure I could not have afforded to play basketball at the level I had been playing in high school, because it costs so much now to do the kind of travel teams that seem to be required. It's more of a much more of an industry now than it had been when I was there. It's much more of an industry. And the fact of the matter is, most of the travel is not necessary. And you, as 10 years old, you can get all the competition you need within a 50-mile, probably a 10-mile radius at this point. And really, the skill work you do at the younger level is the most important thing. The difference technologically is profound. If I had had YouTube to tell me how to do a cross jab or behind the back, or to show me Steph Curry's shooting form, or what footwork looks like when you're running the baseline and you need to square up, I would have absolutely loved that. I didn't have anybody to teach me those things. I just had to watch and learn as it went along. I think the industrialization of youth sports since I was playing when I was young is the biggest difference between the experience. So you have to be very savvy, I think, as a parent to decide, well, what do we want? Not what they're promising. And look at what the promises are, but also look at what the experience of the athletes are too, and realize that no one is going to get an NBA contract at 13.
They're not?
Or WNBA or college scholarship, so the joy and love and the effort and the fitness and the team camaraderie, all of those things, they last through time. That's the same as it for me as it is now. It's just that sometimes I think you can get overwhelmed by what the club is selling. And if they are selling elite athleticism and elite athletes, and that's their focus, then your kid is not an elite athlete or elite you may not want to spend your time there. And who knows if a 10-year-old is an elite anything? You just don't know. I can't remember exactly what your question is, but the differences between really, I think what is the same is that there are kids, athletes, who obviously love the sport. It's just kind of a burning in your belly. And I can see it when a kid walks on the court, whether they got it or not. There's a little, not even a swagger. It's just the desire that's evident to me. And you can see when they just want to have some fun and play. And both of those athletes should have a chance to be successful at the level that they're capable of.
How do you?
I don't think I've actually answered your question.
No, you did. You talked about the then and now, and I totally agree with the AAU programs and commercializing of basketball, and you and I learned on the blacktop.
Yeah.
And my kids always laugh. They always ask this question. You talk about that, like, how did you organize everybody? You didn't have a cell phone. Like, you didn't have text. I'm like, I think about it, like, how did we do that, right?
Yeah.
We called, or we said, we just knew we were going to meet there at the playground at a certain time on, whatever, during the summer, or, that's kind of funny. But
I think too, the ecosystem of the older player, right there, we were enthralled with the just older players, because we could watch that player and try to do what they did. They were our YouTube. Jean Eilers was my YouTube. She would do things with the ball that I couldn't even conceive of, and I would try it, mimic what she was doing. And then I had a video of Stanford, the 89 Stanford, I think it was 89 Stanford World National Championship. And I watched Jennifer Azzi shoot her shooting routine. And I did Jennifer Azzi's shooting routine for probably 6 or 7 years straight, every day, if I could swing it. So I think when there's that hunger, you're gonna find that athlete's gonna find a way to satisfy that need. And that need, I never made it to Stanford basketball. But if I hadn't had Stanford basketball to aspire to, that would have been a real loss for me. And the goal in the end We did beat Stanford, by the way. I'm just going to throw that in there. My senior year, we beat Stanford at home. But I love Tara Vanderveer. I think she's great.
Oh, well, yeah, I was going to add to that. I was like, you know how many hours I practiced the sky hook?
I think we should bring that back.
Right?
That's a great shot, and not in ways.
Yeah.
It's like the floater, right? Everybody's doing the floater now.
Floater. Yeah.
I mean, that's just as good a shot as the floater, especially for a little guy in the middle.
That's right.
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, if you just break that down, right? The amount of distance you have between the player, the defender, and the ball,
Yeah, you could do it mathematically if you needed to. My husband's a mathematician. He could draw you the angle at which the optimal height of the ball would be achieved.
And again, when we do our next podcast about math and basketball, we'll interview.
Oh yeah, he could probably do that for you.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you bring that up, because I do bring that up to a certain degree when I train. I always I talk to the kids, and we're like, hey, what's your favorite subject in school? And if they bring up math, then I relate everything to geometry, math, equations. Basketball is just a math equation, and whatever else. And they're like, oh, I never thought about it that. And their light bulb goes on. I'm like, hey, look at the triangle. See this, right? You always, So we talk about the different types of triangles on the court, right? The geometry part of it. Anyway.
And you're seeing, like, that's how you coach. You see, what's my way of speaking to this player about this game? And it's going to be different for every player.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's the fun part of it, where I try to make it. Well, a mom sat in on a training session yesterday, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, you break the game down into its simplest form. It's really quite unique." And I think that's what makes it fun for the kids too. And that's the other part. She says, "Oh my gosh, the little words and little sayings used, throughout the entire training session." And I think, my big thing, and this is one of my other questions, is this balance of fun. If you think about every time you say what you're doing, which is I play basketball, play means I'm supposed to be having fun. It's playtime. I'm playing a game, right? I play with my friends, set up a play date, right? I think as coaches,
my cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled, but stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
We suck away the fun, right? Yeah. And because of the way basketball is structured right now, right? Yeah. I have to win in order to attract the parents, to get the money, blah, 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 right? To get the right kids to my program, right? And, of course there's the rec leagues and all of that, but even that, it's like, I don't know. How do we put the fun back in fundamentals in basketball? Right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to switch the word from fun to joy.
Okay.
Joy is a bit more complicated than that. It's not always laughy, clappy.
Okay, I like that.
I mean, and you can have joy in the midst of difficulty. There can just be this joy. When you take a charge, that's not fun, right?
Right.
That hurts. But there's this joy in having been in the right place at the right time. And so actually John Edgar Wideman has something to say about play. And it's, if I can remember right, it's like you start just messing around. That's what play is. You throw a ball. I don't think I have the quote somewhere. So you throw a ball through a hoop, a silly, fun trick at first until you decide you want to do it better, right? And then what? And then you go from a fun, silly trick to where is the joy in this self-discovery and this growth in this? And joy is a kind of energy you bring. I'm feeling it right now. I want to be on the court. There's this joy that accompanies the task at hand. How many layups can we get in a row? Let's try that. There's part competition in that, and there's a part of joy of a group achievement. You can take joy in a win. You can even take joy in a loss. I know that sounds nuts, but what it is recognizing the collective feeling of that. And when you come back to the gratitude, recognizing we experienced something together, and we're going to use what we felt to create something new and joyful. Going back to gratitude, there's no better food for joy than recognizing what you're grateful for at any given moment. And
I like that. I really like the spin of the joy, because you're absolutely right. Having, I remembered a game recently where we lost, and they were more happy at the end of that loss than they were after a win. And it was just joy because and maybe it was also the framing of it, which I think is important, is I don't put the emphasis on the outcome, I put it on the effort, and have this mentality of winning equals fun. I'm not saying it isn't part of that equation, but it's not the only thing.
Everybody likes to win.
Yeah. And, sometimes, some those really competitive families look at me, well, that's because you don't win very often. Or you're not competitive enough, so you don't want to win. I'm like, that's like the opposite of how I feel. But at the same time, I don't want the outcome and my happiness or sadness be determined by what just happened on the court. Because I want to feel the joy. So I always tell the kids, I'm like, look, you already won. Why? Because this is just an hour of our time. You just spent 6 hours in practice with the coaching youth team, right? 6 hours in practice. You showed up every day. You showed effort. We're working together as a team. Here's all the things you already won. So you can't, let's not take this 1 hour and consider all the work we did for the week. If we lose that everything we did was a failure, because it's not, right? Anyway, so we talk a lot about that.
Well, that goes back to kind of the Mamba mentality. You had Kobe Bryant, and he talks about winning and losing, and like, no, it's growth.
Yeah,
it's right. Growth, constant kind of search for growth, and he doesn't define it necessarily as athletic growth. In his more mature years, he was very concerned with spiritual growth and different kinds of inhabiting himself. I mean, obviously, I think when things are going well, when you have a team that's bought in, when you have the talent, winning is going to be a consequence of those things.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and often the case in my high school team, we were very often the shortest team in the state tournament. And we were consistently in the state championship game. And why was that? Because we were taught the joy of moving in concert with each other. We took joy in finding a way of undermining more talented teams because we were able to play together. That togetherness too, I think, is a kind of joy. If you can figure out that chemistry. And we didn't like each other all the time. We were a bunch of 16, 17, 18-year-old women. There was lots going on behind the scenes, but when we got on the court, there was a certain swaggering joy that we took from the effort. There's nothing that takes the place of effort in the creation of joy. You can't step on the court, win or lose, and take joy if you haven't put in the effort ahead of time.
Yeah.
The effort is part of the joy. That's one of the great things about sports. You can't check your phone mid-practice. There is a complete immersion in a moment. And that is a joyful thing, especially now when we're so fractured all the time.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right in that. And I often think about that. It's like 2 hours, in one day, my players are not on their phone. And they're fine.
That's a spiritual gift right there.
I want to go back to though. Sorry to cut you off. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. I want to because I want to bring up this. You mentioned earlier, and I wrote a note down. I'm looking at it right now. Energy. Okay. So here's what happens a lot of times. Or here's what happens a lot of times. That's not the right. Here's what happens in practice. Okay. You have your high energy days and your low energy days.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday we had a low energy day. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Low energy day, right? And I had to stop several times to say, okay, you were just going through the motions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And normally, I mean, I'm blessed with a very high energy or good energy team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Focused, they're doing high fives all the time, they're encouraging one another. I mean, there were a bunch of zombies yesterday. Okay, yeah. So you're a youth coach. You have that situation come up. You can just stop practice. You can get mad. You can just do something silly to get their mind off of it. You can stop and talk. What's on your mind? Like, what's going on? It's not like one or two. It was like yesterday 8. And I think, they're feeding off of that energy.
They are.
Right?
Yeah.
So what do you do in that situation? What would you do in that situation?
Well,
I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I'm going to put you on the spot. And
okay.
My question is going to put you on the spot. My question would be, what kind of energy did you bring into the room?
I thought
was that something?
Yeah, no.
I mean, that's the first thing. The coach, and as a professor too, you walk into the room and very conscious of, all right, this is where I want us to be. So I have to be there. Sometimes that doesn't work. And then you have to bring your intuition into the game. There's so much going on with teenage girls.
Yeah.
There's menstruation, there's periods, there's boys, there's the swimsuit that they have to buy and they hate going in. There's all of this stuff. And sometimes it's insurmountable. And sometimes the best thing to do in that situation is, let's just play knockout. And surrender is a viable option at times. And especially if you can, and that just takes kind of an intuition. And sometimes you're going to be wrong. No. But again, going back to that notion is err on the side of compassion. It doesn't mean you're easy. That doesn't mean you don't run, because compassionate coaching might in some case mean we got to take ownership for our own performance here.
Yeah.
But and some practices are just are going to suck. Some days are going to be bad. And the great thing about basketball, especially for coaches, is there's always another practice. There's always another game, an opportunity to kind of switch the energy around. You've had games that are terrible. Sometimes you just have to endure and get to the end of them.
Never.
And then let them go. Actually, that term "let them go" let it go is something that I think is really important, not just for that practice, but for the middle of the game. How do you experience an unjust foul? How do you turn the ball over? And then let it go? How do you let it go? And I think that can be practiced in the course of a practice. First of it, noticed, named, needing to let it go, and then known. Okay, this is how I let it go. That's when you come back to that breath, right? You're holding on to it. Let it go. Go on. And the same thing can be done in small or large terms. Small in the instant of the game when you throw that crappy pass, let it go. Or after a practice, oh God, that was awful. Okay, we'll let it go. We'll take what we can from it.
No, you're absolutely right. And
we'll move on. But then go ahead. What kind of energy do you bring onto the court?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's often not about you. It isn't. But the energy you bring onto the court is something that you can model daily. And if you don't have it, sometimes I just say, like, look, I need you guys to pick it up, because I'm struggling today. So I need you guys to pick it up. And so I'm saying, look, I need you sometimes to get the energy up. And they like that. They like to say, okay, yeah, we'll bring it for coach because she needs help today.
That's a good point.
So there's a
I was going to say what happened after the practice though is I have a leadership council. There's 3 girls on the team. And the one of them approached me because the other 2 were off on vacation. And the one approached me and she says, Coach, I'm sorry. That's on me. And I said, well, not 100%, but at the same time, right, this is one of the things that, we had talked about in the past, which is empowering you. What can you do, right, to help in the situation? And here are the markers that you need to read. And so I was teaching her, okay, so
that's great.
Stop practice about energy and effort, and we talked about it. At some point, feel free to say, Coach, we need a timeout. We're going to go here and talk about whatever situation is going on. And then we'll come back to practice with, some energy and effort. And I said, you can absolutely 100% do that because, and I want you to feed off, I want you to be mature enough and recognize those situations. Now, I'm very, very, very blessed again to have 3 individuals who are mature enough to take on those leadership roles and who are not just, they're okay. They're comfortable talking with their peers, right? Yeah. Pulling them aside and having those conversations. So you got to have the right people. But anyway, I think you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. If you empower your players to be part of the solution, we as adults don't always have to have the solution. And
they know that. They know that we don't.
Yeah.
They see right through us.
No, yeah, exactly. So anyway, I
love that though. And you bring up the talents. What are noticing? What are the talents of your team? That young lady over there understands. She can see when someone's down. She's talking. She's a natural leader.
Yeah.
Great. Name it. You're a natural leader. Yeah. Known. Everybody knows this is one of our captains. Right. So notice naming and known. And then that person can step up into a role, whether she is a scorer or not, whether she's a starter or not, and embrace that role. And it's not as though you're assigning it. You're just noticing already what she's doing. And you're going to if you have 12 players on the team, 1 or 2 are going to be that person. Just in terms of, statistics, it's probably going to happen. And
I'm very fortunate to have 3 that are just outstanding.
Yeah, that's great.
Never had 3 before, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, right? They take on a lot of responsibility, and I put a lot of responsibility on them because I'm like, oh, like you said, I noticed it. This will, no matter if they stop playing basketball tomorrow, they can take these leadership skills and apply them to other things. And I think as coaches, it truly is our job. The sport we play is just a vehicle for teaching. Right. And that's the mentality I approach sports with. And as a coach who does teach or who's working with younger kids, I think it's really important that we're connecting the dots between life and sport.
Yeah. And it's a spiritual act. I tell my athletes and my artists, art is a spiritual act. Yeah. Athletics is a spiritual act. You're using gifts that you have been given. And you're developing them with a purpose larger than yourself in mind.
Yeah.
That's a tremendous mindset, whether you apply it to sports or art or engineering or teaching. And you don't have to define what spiritual means, although you might have your own definition. You might have your own tradition. And there's no harm in developing that part of yourself within this framework.
Yeah, and we have a framework that we created too that encompasses all of what, the mental side, the spiritual side of, we don't call it that because that always,
it's hard.
It's hard and it's right. Everybody
has
different thoughts and feelings on that. But it really truly is. One thing I also want to talk about here is you mentioned a key word, gift. It was on one of the podcasts. And it was, Doc Shepler brought this up, and he was talking about, when you're teaching an athlete something new, you're giving them a gift. The focus of the podcast was on shooting. That's his big thing, is shooting. Yeah. And so we talked about the gift of teaching someone how to shoot. And that has really stuck with me and resonated with me. And if you think about shooting in particular, it's how we grade the game, right? How many points did you score? I'm not saying that's right, but that's what I scored. What's the first thing? I scored 9 points today, or I scored 0 points today. I'm like, well, how many stops did you get? Well, I got all the stops on the team, but I scored 0 points. You know what I mean? It's like, right. Okay, so I can give you the gift of shooting. Let's start there. And I never used to start there because I was more holistic. But man, what I realized, if I can give them the gift of shooting, that's the starting point. And then it builds from there. Their enthusiasm for the game, because they see the ball go through the basket. Then they learn defense. They're more excited about learning defense because they're like, oh my gosh, I can get the ball back? Oh, if I can stop someone, right? Anyway, so talk about these gifts. And it changes your mindset and how you approach the game and how you teach the game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost a toolbox. And we were speaking before about one of the players you're coaching, and there's just a little change of when she's catching the ball, she's bringing it here, then she's bringing it here. Right. And if you can just move so that your feet are first, catch the ball as close as you can into the shooting pocket, so that motion is simplified. And a lot of what you're doing when you're teaching shooting, especially anything skill wise, is you're simplifying the motion to the point where it's the most efficient it can be.
That's right.
And that takes, especially with shooting, getting the ball in the hoop at first is the only thing. And then you want to be efficient. And in order to be efficient, you have to be patient enough to learn the mechanics that will allow you to be as efficient as possible. And a lot of youth players, they're not learning the mechanics early enough. Yeah. And they're having, so that when you have the success of going through the ball going through the hoop, they have this joy that will not translate in years and years to come, because now they're going to have to relearn all the mechanics in order to be efficient. So if you can give them that gift of just the mechanical motion, so that when they get older, the kid who's making all the points shooting this crazy thing is going to have to relearn his shot completely. And the kid who's not quite there yet but has the mechanics will start to use that gift and be more successful later. And that's patience, right? That's another huge lesson in sport. You are not going to get what you want right now. What you're doing today and tomorrow and the next day and a year from now is in a continuum of growth. And that's a really important lesson today. There's not a measure of instant gratification. That's why it's joyful, not just happy.
Well, it's the same thing as parenting, right? As a coach, right? It's like, what we're doing today, we may not see the fruits of our labor, but I always judge that as, do they want to come back? Do they remember some of the teachings? And that gives me joy if they can do that.
I remember my great coaches, and I remember the people I would rather have never met on the court. Both of them taught me a great deal. But I have a tremendous gratitude for the ones who, like Coach Gansky at Bear River, who took the time to know me. And told me things I didn't want to hear all the time, but needed to hear. Or I didn't want to hear, but needed to consider, even if it wasn't exactly right.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that athletes today...
Hello, Nigel here. As an owl, I love to be awake all night, but allergy sufferers like you probably don't feel the same. So take Xyzal at night to relieve allergies while you sleep. Then wake up fully refreshed for a more productive day. Xyzal works fast and offers 24-hour continuous relief from sneezing, runny nose, itchy watery eyes, and itchy nose and throat, so you can enjoy doing the things you love all day long. Be wise all. Take Xyzal at night. Use as directed. Starts working in 45 minutes.
Whether your business has 6 floors or 6 employees, Volmer Business has everything you need to save time, money, and hassle. You can restock your break room with bulk ordering or bulk up your ordering team with shared payments. And you can get it all delivered straight to your business's door, whether that's on Wall Street or Main Street. Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
We got to do a better job as a whole, telling them what they don't want to hear, right? You know, areas that you need to, and there's obviously ways to do that the right way, right? But, you know, we're without getting political or anything, but we're always worried that it's going to come back as a coach to an angry parent. Oh, you told my daughter she doesn't hustle enough, and right. You know, those types of conversations that you end up having with parents. Well, you know, it's like,
that comes back to how, you have to figure out how you're going to say it. And actually that's pushed the coaching profession and the coaching, even in amateur levels. You have to be more positive than a lot of the coaches I had. Yeah. If I'm going to tell a athlete, you got to change your shot. I'm not going to say you have a terrible shot. I'm going to say you're going to have more success if you try this. You're going to give it, if you have patience and you do this, you're going to be more successful. And then it's their decision. And some of them won't make that decision. Some of them really don't care. And you just have to allow that too. There's a limit to what you can do. But that player, and we were talking about one of your players before the show begins, you know, that player, whether or not she goes on to college basketball or not, that, okay, I want to try that, I want to get better mentality is going to serve her for her whole life. Yeah. And I would take 10 of her. You know?
Yes, right. I know. Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you taking the time to help her. All right. Any final thoughts as we wrap things up? Anything you want to leave with our coaches out there? We had a great conversation on a number of different topics, but is there something maybe we can just wrap it all up here with form at the end? I guess
coming back to noticing, naming, and knowing the people who come on your court, and finding a way to acknowledge those things will let that person feel of value, whoever they are and whatever their skills are. I don't know. My email is maryvolmer@gmail. If you have any questions for me specifically, I haven't done a lot of youth coaching. I've worked more with professional artists and NCAA athletes, but if there's some question or concern, I'm happy to to address it, or to try. And if I don't know, I'll try to send you somewhere more fruitful.
Well,
in the end,
for sure.
Yeah.
And we're very thankful for your time and sharing your wisdom with us on the podcast today. And my message, I think the big takeaway for me in this conversation was the word joy. I really like the summing it up with the word joy instead of just play. It's joyful, because you're right, that makes a lot more sense to me, resonates a lot. So
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely,
anytime I can talk sports and basketball, right? I'm happy.
All right. Well, until next time, because I think we already came up with our next show idea somewhere in you mentioned something, a couple of them anyway. All right. Till next time, Mary, we'll see you on a court, I am sure, in the Bay Area. And thank you again for your time.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bill.
I appreciate you.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.